Well, hello again, WestJet Pilots and other podcast listeners, and welcome to this edition of PIREP, the WestJet Pilots podcast. I am your host, of course, Captain Desmond Jordan, and today is a very special edition of the podcast. We are downtown Toronto today on the 25th floor of the CAAT building, which is the College of Applied Arts and Technology pension building. As we know, the communications for the pension has recently dropped. It's been something that, as a group, we've been working towards for some time and is of significant importance to our families and to our financial futures. With that in mind, we have the good fortune today of being joined by three experts in that area. Our two WestJet subject matter experts, Clayton Gossen. How are you today, Clayton?
Hey, Desmond. Thanks for having me. I'm doing well.
Excellent. And also Dan Bernier.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Excited to be here. Thanks.
And we also have the privilege of having our very special guest, the CEO of the CAAT pension plan, is here to join us today, Derek Dobson. Derek, how are you today?
I'm doing very well, Desmond. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's poignant that the CEO of the corporation is actually here to address our concerns specifically. As you guys all know, as the chair of Pilot to Pilot, my opinion is when you want the facts, you get the facts from the experts, and there is nobody more expert than yourself. So once again, thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, and I actually look forward to being in some of the in-person meetings later this year.
And we look forward to that as well. Okay, before we get too far down the line, could we just take an opportunity perhaps to get a little bit of background from our subject matter experts as to how we got here in this pension journey? Clayton, could you start us off?
Thanks, Desmond. Yeah, so my name is Clayton Gossen. I'm a 787 first officer, and you can probably guess because I'm here, I'm really excited about pensions, and I really think CAAT is a great plan. This journey towards the pension plan started about a year ago, almost exactly now. It came in as CA2 is being ratified, and our new agreement has a lot of language in it around a pension. And basically right away, Dan and I knew we needed expert help. We weren't going to be able to find our pilots of pensions ourselves. We simply lacked the expertise. So I reached out to the MEC group in Toronto, a pension consulting company. They came recommended to us as ALPA has used them before. We hired them to be our consultant and find our pilots the best pension plan they could, and one that also fits within the collective agreement.
So Clayton, you've been carrying the water on this for some time. How long have you been involved in this project?
Pretty much 7 years now. It's been a long slog, and we're really close to the finish line. It's taken way longer than any of us thought it would, but when you want to do a project right, sometimes it just takes a little bit longer.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I'm okay with that. So we're bringing in a good product, and we're almost there.
Good stuff. Good to know. Like you say, the important thing is not to get a product quickly. It's to get the appropriate product for our group, right? So thank you very much for that, for all the time that you've already invested. How about yourself, Dan?
Oh, hi. My name's Dan. I've been WestJet Pilots since 2015. That's about 9 years now. 737 FO in Toronto. I joined the benefits committee a couple years ago, and I basically have a large interest in retirement. Anyone that flies with me knows I could talk about it all day long, to their detriment sometimes. But yeah, I was involved with the pension committee for a couple of years, and when CA2 came out, we had the opportunity to put together a pension proposal for the pilots. We got together with Clayton and the MEC group to get us here today. So I'm pretty excited to finally be able, now that the cat's out of the bag, yeah, I said it. The cat's out of the bag. We can finally talk about the things that Clayton and I and everyone else has been really excited about for some time. So we can start to reveal to the pilots what their future is going to look like. So for me, there's three main points that made me excited. It's flexibility. The pilots will have flexibility in their retirement date, flexibility in their investment, and how they can continue investing on the side if they wish, even though they could participate in the pension plan. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about that a little bit further down. Certainty, this being a defined benefit pension plan, when the pilots look at their pension number, that's exactly what they're going to get. So they'll have that certainty going forward. And confidence, with like 100,000 members of the pension plan and hundreds of employers, you can have the confidence that the plan's going to endure during your career and your retirement, and that the funds will be there.
That's a big point.
And all of that was achieved while still being able to preserve the greater take home that we realized with CA2. that was the cherry on top.
It sounds like multiple wins on multiple levels.
I think so.
Yeah.
You guys will be excited.
Yeah, good work to you guys on bringing us to this point. And speaking on behalf of the pilot group, we are all very grateful for the volunteer time that you guys have put in. Now, to our guest of honor. As I mentioned, we do have the CEO of the CAAT pension plan here with us today. It is my pleasure to again introduce Mr. Derek Dobson. Now, Derek, could I just ask you for possibly maybe a little bit of background and history on your career?
Sure. Happy to share that, Desmond. And please call me Derek.
Okay.
So I've been in pensions for over 30 years. I'm glad this is a podcast, so you can't see all the gray in my hair, but it's been a pleasure. I've been CEO of CAAT for the last 15 years, and I love my job. I love bringing pensions to more and more Canadian workers and helping them retire in a more secure way. So I'm living the job of my dreams.
That is incredible. And once again, thank you for being here. Now, I'm a pilot, and as are all the people that are listening to our podcast. And like many pilots, I am data and information driven. So this is the point where we're going to start to drill down a little bit on some of the nuts and bolts of what this exciting opportunity is for the pilots. First question, probably a very obvious question. Derek, could I ask you, what is CAAT?
Sure. So a couple of things that I'd mention there. So CAAT is one of Canada's highest performing and most sustainable pension plans. We've been around for over 50 years. We started by serving the Ontario college sector, and then about 5 years ago, we opened up the plan to all Canadian workplaces. Another thing that I'd mention is that we're also a not-for-profit pension trust, or what we call a profit-for-member pension plan. What that means is that every single dollar in our pension plan, and we have over $20 billion in our pension plan, it all goes to member benefits. And we have over 500 professional staff working for us in Canada, and these are who your members will interact with. That's another unique feature. We're a big believer in making sure our members understand the pension plan and can better retire as a result.
Excellent. So further expansion to that answer, could you give us some background as to what type of a plan or what kind of a plan the CAAT pension is? Because we know there are different types of pension plans out there.
Yeah, as already mentioned, we're what's called a defined benefit pension plan. So what does that mean? A defined benefit pension plan, it doesn't matter what's happening with interest rates or what's happening in the investment markets. You're going to get a predictable lifetime retirement income based on the contributions you and WestJet are making to our pension plan. So this is very predictable. And later, I think we'll probably talk about our retirement estimators that we're going to build for the pilots, which allows them to predict with a great amount of certainty exactly how much pension they're going to get every month for the rest of their life when they retire. So that's defined benefit. And the other thing that I'll mention about the CAAT pension plan is we're not a target benefit pension plan. So what does that mean? Some pension plans out there, if they get into trouble, they can cut your benefits. At CAAT, we cannot. Under DB+, which is what the pilots are joining, whatever pension they're granted, they're going to get that for the rest of the life, no matter what's happening in the investment markets. And in fact, the plan is doing so well, we expect we're going to continue to grant conditional extra enhancements to their benefits throughout their life.
Exciting. So Dan, a question for you. How is CAAT partnering with the WestJet ALPA pilots to help the pilots?
Well, essentially, as you know, CA2 allowed us to redirect the 10% that WestJet's already committed to the pilots to a different pension plan. So CAAT is the pension plan that we have chosen. So it's as simple as redirecting the 10% that's currently going to your WSP over to CAAT, and you participate in that plan. It turns out that we'll have to have the pilots contribute a very small amount on their own as well from their paychecks. That's going to be 1%. But I guess we could have Derek answer this. Derek, why do the pilots have to contribute anything at all?
Yeah, great question. It's really dictated by pension law, which the CAAT pension plan is governed by. And as what's called a jointly sponsored pension plan means that members and employers both have to contribute. As you've alluded to, the employers can pay more, so their 10% goes in, and the pilots, we're putting at our minimum contribution rate at 1%. And I think pilots should be very happy. There's a study out there in the industry that shows contributions go about twice as far in a pension plan like ours compared to an RSP or defined contribution. So every dollar they're contributing is going a lot farther than it would otherwise.
That's great. Thank you. I think I want to reiterate how important it was for us to preserve our take home. So to manage just the minimum 1% from the pilots on every paycheck towards their pension was an acceptable sacrifice.
I'd also briefly mention that the 1% is tax deductible.
Exactly. Thank you.
Good to know, because we all love taxes. Clayton, a bit of a question for you. You know, there are a lot of different pension plans out there. How did we decide to go with CAAT?
Well, we used our consultant, right, the McAteer Group, for a lot of help, right? So we had McAteer draft up an RFI for us. That's request for information, and we filled it with questions. We asked everything, and we had a lot of input in this. We asked, for example, can we see your audited financial statements? We asked, have you ever had a benefit cut? Because obviously that's very important to us. We even asked things like, have you had a cyber breach? We asked way more than that, lots of questions. And then as the responses came back last fall, McAteer bundled the information for us. They asked follow-up questions, and then in time, they sent us a clear recommendation. If I could just point out, Dan and I, independently from one another and separately from McAteer, we also looked at the data as it was coming back, and we also agreed with McAteer that CAAT is by far the best pension for our pilots. So once we had a recommendation from McAteer, we took this data to our MEC and status reps, and once they had their questions answered, they had a unanimous vote in favor of CAAT DB+. It was pretty exciting.
Yeah, and I'd just like to commend the analysis that was done. As I mentioned off the top, we have more than 400 employers, including the Canadian Institute of Actuaries, think tanks like Conference Board of Canada, law firms, highly paid people like nuclear physicists and engineers. And you've had the most comprehensive review process coming into the CAAT pension plan of all those groups. So I really want to commend the amount of analysis that went into this process. I think the pilots are well served by what was done.
Yeah, it's an important decision, and obviously not taken lightly by our leadership group, and another example of how important it is to all of us here in the WestJet Pilot Group. So Dan, as mentioned, pilots are very much data-driven, and the CAAT pension plan has a calculator, if I'm not mistaken. It's not the one specifically for WestJet, but this is one that we could use to get some kind of generic ballpark ideas for some of our members. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And I've spent countless hours myself playing with this and looking at different scenarios for myself, of course.
Okay.
As I'm sure some of the other members have done. The website link has probably made its way through the ranks, but we'll definitely share it with everyone through the podcast and through the MEC communications. So once you get on the website, you'll find the DB Plus value estimator tool. You'll simply go to I agree at the bottom, hit start. And then, of course, it's going to want your birthday. So you're going to type in, hey, Des, how about we just use you as an example?
Sure.
What's your birthday?
Well, let's work through a couple just so we get a couple of different outcomes for different members in the group. But yeah, we can start with myself.
Okay.
I'm born 1973.
And the month?
February. And the date is the 21st.
21st. It's going to ask for your annual gross income. So we could just, use your hourly rate times 77.5 times 12, et cetera. I'm just going to round it up or ballpark it to $270,000 annually. And you hit calculate. It'll take you to the next screen. It already presents you with the number. But what we can do is drill down a little further. And on the left, you're going to see employment assumptions, your date of enrollment, the assumptions on your earnings increases throughout the years. I just leave it at the default 3% that's there.
Okay.
You'll see retirement assumptions. This is where you can play with your retirement age. It's defaulting to 65, which is the standard age for us. Whether you have a spouse or not, it defaults to yes, because we do have spousal benefits included with CAAT DB+.
Very important, and we'll get to those a bit later.
Exactly. The contribution rate, this is where you're going to want to come in and make a change, because this is a generic calculator. It just plops in 5% employer and 5% employee. But with our deal with WestJet, we plop in 10% for the employer contribution and just 1% for the employee contribution. Now, the next drop down is the pension plan assumptions. You could leave that as is, but what you'll find out a little further down in the podcast is that one of the enhancements CAAT has granted is going from an 8.5% accrual rate, which is currently today, to a 9.5% accrual rate.
Could I just ask for clarification on what the accrual rate is? That's a jargon that everybody may not be specific with. Derek, could you touch on that for us?
Sure, happy to. So basically that's our pension formula. Each year the member contributes and WestJet contributes. They will earn a pension basically multiplying the contributions we received in that year by 9.5%, and that converts what you'll get annually in a pension for the rest of your life each year. So that's really how it works. Contributions times 9.5% equals pension earned in that year.
Perfect. Thank you for the clarification.
Exactly. So on that note, you can see that this is a great time for WestJet Pilots to be joining the plan because we're going to start right off at 9.5% accrual rate. So you can go in there, make that change to 9.5, and you go to the bottom and hit calculate. And you have your result. Des, do you want to know the number?
Sure, you can tell me that number.
All right. We'll say it's about $60,000 per year for the rest of your life.
Okay, so $60,000 per year if I quite simply transfer from putting my 10% into Manulife into this pension plan with my 1% contribution. I'm going to get $60,000 per year as long as I live, and then whatever the survival benefits are for my spouse after that point.
Exactly.
Okay.
I believe the default survivor benefits is 60%.
Okay, so that's a good ballpark indication for possibly somebody in my scenario. I have somewhere between 10 and 14 years left. Let's look at a couple of other scenarios. Let's take somebody who's, let's say, 37 years old, captain at top scale. How about we work through that one?
Okay, a 37-year-old captain at the top scale. I'm just going to put a birth year in here of 1987. January 1st, annual earnings, $270,000 as a ballpark. The same employment assumptions, I'll leave that default. Retirement assumptions at 65. Contribution rate, again, we changed that to 10% from WestJet, 1% from the pilot. The pension plan assumptions, again, I'm going to make that change to 9.5% accrual rate, which we should all be celebrating, thanks to Derek's explanation. And we're going to hit calculate. Let's see what we get. Okay, that is a very young captain who's going to enjoy 30 years at the captain wage, is looking at an annual pension of $209,000 a year for the rest of their lives.
Okay, that is a sizable pension payment. Just to be clear for our pilot group, what earnings are eligible for the pension contribution?
Well, just to keep it simple, nothing is really changing. Okay, CA2 was very clear about that. All we're doing is redirecting the 10% that's currently going to WSP over to CAAT. So all the same wages that are eligible for WSP are eligible for the CAAT pension plan. It's nothing new. We're not reinventing the wheel. So straight time, no overtime, nothing like that.
Okay, good to know. It's good that that's clarified. So we've looked at the scenario for someone who's kind of middle to the end of their career. We looked at the scenario for a captain with a long tenure. Because there are changes in compensation and changes in position for a new joiner, it would be difficult to estimate what it would be for them, what their pension payout would be for them at this point, bearing in mind that there will be a WestJet pension-specific calculator coming out in the future. Why don't we take this opportunity now to look at somebody who's, kind of towards the end of their career. Let's say 60, 5 years left potentially to go from there. Why don't we have a look at that and see what the numbers come back for that?
Okay, so that's easy enough to do. I'll just go in and change the birth year to, say, January 1st, 1964.
Okay.
It's a 60-year-old captain. We're assuming captain, $270,000 earnings, contribution rate 10% WestJet, 1% pilot, pension plan assumption of 9.5% pension factor, and we'll hit calculate. And that person, even though they're only going to be in for 5 more years, they're still looking at a pension, guaranteed pension of $15,000 per year for the rest of their life.
Okay, so they make no changes. They'll have a pension income of $15,000 per year. That is an interesting point. Because, somebody who's like myself who's in their 50s, I've had conversations with other pilots who are around my age or even a little bit older. Their belief is that they'll probably do better, or they think that they could do better or get a better return from just leaving it in the market than having that pension income. Derek, are they correct with that assumption?
It would be very, very difficult to outpace what they'd be getting at a DB plus at these later ages. So for example, I'm age 56. I would be joining DB Plus in a heartbeat without a hesitation. And I'm a seasoned investment expert. So the pension plan will do well for all workers. And I would not hesitate recommending to my friends who are 60, 62, 64 to join the pension plan, even if it's only for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. There's something in this pension plan for everybody because it's so hard to outperform this. And again, it's a predictable lifetime pension. And also, if it's okay, I'd like to mention, because we get, of our 100,000 members, we get these types of questions a lot. And I will mention for people coming from an RSP, we're just talking about new contributions. So are the new contributions you're going to make from today till retirement, are they better off in DB Plus or managing yourself? They're better off in DB Plus for the vast majority of members.
So you're saying that the CAAT pension is going to pay you back better than investing in Bitcoin or buying wheat stocks. Is that correct?
I'm not going to make comments on those types of stocks.
Well, I will.
But there are studies out there that suggest that 95, 96% of members will do better in DB, like DB Plus, compared to managing things on their own. And the people who will outperform a DB pension plan, the small minority of excellent investors, are typically very aggressive investors, willing to take a lot of risk and die young. Those are the groups who typically will outperform. And again, that's 3-4% of members.
So we've given a lot of information about this plan and multiple reasons why our members should participate and opt into this plan, which is the default option. But we've also made a commitment to our pilots, for those who are not interested, to be able to opt out. What is the process surrounding that, Dan?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Des. Thanks very much. It's very important for the members to be fully educated before the starting date of January 1st, 2025. So there's plenty of time, but it will come fairly fast and furious. So do pay attention throughout the summer and the fall to all the material that's going to be coming your way. That being said, CA2 does have a provision for the pilots to opt out of the plan if they so choose. The default, of course, is that we're all going to participate. We're all being defaulted as opting in. So if you specifically want to opt out, you'll have to do that. The mechanism hasn't been determined yet, exactly how you'll do that, but there's plenty of time. But the deadline for that will be November 30th, 2024.
So once you've opted out, will you have the option to opt back in?
No. It's a one-time option. Generally, that option doesn't even exist. Most plans, when they're created with an employer, you're in, that's it, that's all. But CA2 negotiations, we managed to get that for the pilots, this one-time opt-out.
Good. So we've provided the pilots with added flexibility. If that's something that they choose that they want to do, we wouldn't recommend it. The actuaries probably wouldn't recommend it. But as per our agreement, that is an option that is available to the pilots.
Correct.
Okay, so we've got a bit of a background on this pension plan and what some of the potential payouts might be. And we have previously discussed the contributions that go into the plan. Specifically, the company is contributing the 10% as they are now into the plan, and the pilot group will be contributing the additional 1% for a total of 11%. Are there limits to what can be contributed to this plan, Derek?
Yes, they're really, we look at it similar limits to the RSPs on how they're treated. So the limits are similar. So essentially that means that the dollar limit that pilots and WestJet can contribute collectively in 2024 at least is $34,900. That limit will go up slightly in 2025. It goes up each year based on inflation. But I do want to mention that DB Plus is way more tax efficient than RSPs. And that's really because when you contribute, the tax law says you need to convert that to what's called a pension adjustment. And that pension adjustment is what reduces your RSP room, the maximum RSP room, just like your contributions are today going from WestJet to the current plan. So because of that calculation, pilots will actually get about another $8,000 in RSP room on top of the $34,900. So essentially, instead of only being able to deduct $34,900 in total, now you're able to deduct more like $42,000, $43,000 if you're at that top wage bracket.
That is an important point to have because tax efficiency is something that is highly important to our pilots because we're in that bracket where we pay a sizable amount of taxation on the income that we have.
Yeah, definitely. Tax efficiency is something that keeps coming up in the flight deck. A lot of the pilots talk about wanting to find a solution that's the most tax beneficial to them. So for me, learning this aspect of the CAAT DB Plus, this was the cherry on top of the sundae, followed by hot fudge and sprinkles. This is the absolute cherry on top, that we would get the pension plan and further RSP contribution room, so you can have further tax sheltering. So now you're going way past what you can do with the WSP alone as far as the tax sheltered benefit. I can't reiterate this enough. This is a huge aspect to this plan.
Yeah, I'd also like to mention to the pilots that later this year, later in 2024, we're going to be launching something called Growth Plus, which will allow pilots to move old RSP money or this new RSP room that they're granting into our plan and earn our net rate of return of the CAAT pension plan. And I'd also share with the pilots that I'm going to be member 001 in this plan. I'm moving all my RSPs into Growth Plus.
Interesting. That gives me a high level of confidence right there. Along that same line, that kind of leads me into another question that we've been getting often is, what if some of the pilots, or if a pilot has money in his RSP and wants to increase his pension? Is it possible essentially to do a buyback?
Absolutely. So our plan is built on making as many options available to our members as possible. And if pilots want to use RSPs they've already accumulated to purchase additional DB Plus pension, they can do so. They can do this at any time up until the time they retire. And also mention, when we build the customized web estimator for pilots, there'll be a simple box to put in different amounts of money to see how much more pension you buy. So pilots will be able to see, if they throw in $100,000, how much extra lifetime pension does that buy for them?
Okay. Is there a limit to the amount that a pilot can buy back?
Again, the tax rules are out there, so there are tax rules which limit the amount. And basically, it's 18% of your income, all your prior income, with WestJet is purchasable in DB Plus.
Okay. So as a pilot, I could go back from the start of my career, look how much money I have earned at WestJet, take 18% of that, and that amount in RSP funds I could then, if I so chose, transfer into the DB Plus program.
That's correct.
Okay.
And there's no limit on our Growth Plus. If you just want to get the CAAT rate of return, you can transfer 100% of your account balance if you choose.
Okay.
So that could be a great strategy for some of the older pilots that might want to shore up their smaller pension of just 3, 4, 5 years. If they want to do a buyback, they can balloon their pension as much as they want, essentially, if they have the RSP funds available to do that.
Okay.
That's right.
And that would be the buyback, because there is a difference here between Growth Plus, which is investing with CAAT to get the plan's net rate of return, and then the buyback is a little separate.
Okay.
Exactly. You're buying extra lifetime pension rather than savings. So they are quite different, and allows pilots to tailor their retirement to their own needs.
Okay, so just to reiterate, I can see on the CAAT pension calculator that we were playing with earlier and having a lot of fun with, there is a purchase estimator built right in there as well. So a pilot can play with that as well if they want to see what effect a buyback could do to their pension, right on the CAAT website right now.
Yeah. Just to be clear, it's 18% of all your earnings at WestJet.
Correct.
Yes. Okay, good. So just to be clear and to summarize, the buyback and the Growth Plus are a little bit different. The buyback is the idea of taking funds, putting it into the pension to increase your pension payout at the time of retirement. And the Growth Plus is more like investing with CAAT with your money and then getting the same returns that you would get as an investment. Different than a pension payout, but the same returns on an investment that the pension fund is offering. Is that a fair summarization?
That's exactly right. And to put it in my own words, Growth Plus is like your RSP, but instead of investing with Manulife, you're investing with the CAAT pension plan. So it acts like an RSP, and you'll have options when you retire to draw that account balance down over your retirement career. You could start drawing it down even before you retire if you want to reduce the hours that you're working. So you'll have more flexibility to access Growth Plus. Whereas if you do a purchase, you're going to get that predictable lifetime pension with inflation protection, free surviving spouse benefits. So you're just increasing your DB Plus payout.
Excellent. I don't want to put you on the spot, but what kind of a return is Growth Plus offering at this time?
I can't predict the future. I've left my crystal ball at home today. In terms of our looking backwards, our net return after paying all our investment expenses, has been 9.3% over 10 years. And as there's a benchmark that we have against all pension plans above $1 billion in what's called our custodians CIBC Mellon Bank of New York Mellon Index, and we're Canada's #1 top performing pension plan. So that 9.3% over 10 years is the best return out of all the pension plans in that database.
And Derek, you spoke about the paying the investment experts, et cetera. Is there a cost to the pilots associated with joining the plan, a sort of a management expense ratio or anything like that?
So WestJet and pilots will never pay a cent more than their contribution rates, their 1% in the plan. And that's including any in-person presentations we do all free of charge, any estimates we do for you, any calculations, everything is done free of charge.
Okay.
Excellent.
Good to know. That was a question that we had, is what are the management expense ratios associated with this plan? And that has cleared that up for us. Thank you very much.
So Derek, something that's jumped out to me from the welcome doc and also just from all my research into CAAT is that you guys are boasting a $5 billion surplus. What does that mean? As in, what's the money for? Is it for the members? Will it just sit there? What can we expect to happen with this surplus?
So the CAAT pension plan is what we call a profit for member pension plan. And then as I mentioned earlier, once you've earned a pension and earned any enhancements in the past, we can never take those away. So we need to have some reserves built in. And all this is articulated in our funding policy, which is basically a roadmap for as surplus grows, how much extra pension will we grant to pilots and all of our other 100,000 members in there. So we built this funding policy in 2007, and it basically shows as the surplus grows, we start granting enhancements. Dan already covered that we're moving the pension factor from 8.5% of contributions up to 9.5% contributions as an example. Earlier on, even if we have $1 surplus, we're going to pay inflation enhancements to all of our members every year. And we've had a perfect record since we introduced that in 2007, including during the global financial crisis. So for clarity, we've always granted inflation protection in the history of the pension plan in DB+. There's other enhancements like enhanced early retirement subsidies. And then we're in what's called, I know it might not make sense to pilot, but there's 6 main levels to our funding policy. And we're at the second highest level, funding policy level 5, which is where that 9.5 factor comes in. At funding level 6, it's not defined exactly what will increase, but we will have to increase benefits further because there are income tax maximums of how much surplus can be saved for a rainy day fund. So the $5 billion that Clayton mentioned isn't the maximum, but we're nearing the maximum, which just means that we're going to give more value for the same amount of contributions received.
So Derek, in your answer, you mentioned the idea of inflation protection. Is this an index pension?
It is an index pension.
Okay. Could you just give some clarity as to what that actually means? What is an index pension? A lot of our pilots may not actually know what that actually means.
So I think a goal of pilots and all of our members is to maintain the purchasing power of their pension through retirement. The average Canadian, it might surprise people, who's 60 today, more than half of them are going to see their 90th birthday. In fact, 1 out of every 7 will see their 98th birthday. So it's very important that you have inflation protection enhancements to maintain that purchasing power of pension. So on a technical basis, what CAAT does is we pay 75% of the consumer price index, and that's meant to maintain your purchasing power over time.
So you mentioned that you've done this indexing since 2007 with a perfect track record. What can we expect on a go-forward basis? What's the likelihood that it'll continue into the future?
So we do something technical called an asset liability management study, which looks out to the next 20 years. And as I'm a mathematician, and I hesitate to say that it's 100% certain, but all the scenarios that we tested, and there was 1,000 economic scenarios, all of them showed us paying inflation protection each and every year for the next 20 years.
What is the value of the assets under management for CAAT?
So the plan currently has over $20 billion in our pension fund to protect the pension promises we've made to all of our members.
A significant amount of money. Derek, you are an absolute wealth of knowledge, obviously. I was wondering if you could just touch on this for us. Can you explain how the pension grows while it's still working, specifically the quote AIW, what that is and how that works?
Yeah, happy to. So similar to maintaining your purchasing power in retirement, contributions you're making in 2025 to our pension plan, you want to make sure that that amount of pension you've earned in 2025 continues to grow while you're working. So the pension plan uses AIW, which stands for Average Industrial Wage. It's calculated annually by StatsCan, so it's an external benchmark, and it basically is a proxy for wage inflation in Canada. Because as wages go up, typically the cost of other things go up as well. So basically we're just trying to maintain the purchasing power of your pension while you're working and in retirement as well. The major difference between AIW and Consumer Price Index, or CPI, is that in retirement we're paying 75% of CPI. While you're working, we're paying 100% of AIW as long as we have surplus.
So we have our accrual rate of 9.5%, and now you're saying each year our pension will grow by the AIW. Is that also guaranteed, or is just our base pension guaranteed?
So the pension accrual factor is what is paid to our members no matter what. So that's what you're earning in the year your contributions are made. So that's very much locked in. AIW and CPI in retirement, that requires the plan to have surplus as according to our funding policy to grant it. So we, again, since DB Plus was introduced in 2018, we have never missed granting AIW enhancements as well. And similar to CPI, Consumer Price Inflation Protection, it has a very, very high likelihood of being paid indefinitely into the future. So it is conditional on how much surplus we have, but there's a very high likelihood it will be paid. And I will also mention that once an enhancement has been granted on top of your base pension, it can never be taken away as well. And just to give people some context, so one of the examples we used earlier on was somebody at age 35, 37. If they join the pension plan, these AIW conditional enhancements could add 20, 25, 30% to their pension while they're working.
Just to summarize for the pilots, what we're presenting them is a defined benefit pension plan with guaranteed returns on their retirement date that is nearly entirely indexed to inflation. Is that correct?
That's correct. When people ask what CAAT DB Plus is, I often say it's a defined benefit plan with an upside. So what's different from a single employer pension plan is that all of the surplus is owned by our members, all $5 billion. So we can only give you enhancements. It can't be used for contribution holidays for the employer as an example. So the members get the upside of the pension plan, not any employer.
So Derek, related to that $5 billion, I've also seen it worded as 124% funding ratio. What does that mean to the average pilot?
So what it means is that for every dollar of pension promise we've made to our 100,000 members, we have $1.24 in the bank standing behind that promise. So basically we have a 24% surplus to cover off things like poor investment returns or members even living longer than we have anticipated.
So what I'm hearing here is that this CAAT pension plan is built for longevity. Now, as we all know, the airline industry has its ups and downs, and sometimes airlines fail. So in the unlikely event, God forbid, that something happened to WestJet, they went bankrupt, they went out of business, whatever that situation would be, how would that affect me as a member of this CAAT pension plan?
So members should feel very comfortable. So pension benefits under CAAT are not impacted by the financial viability of any employer, including WestJet. So even in that unlikely and hopefully never scenario that WestJet closes down, all the pensions that have been earned up to that date are going to be paid 100 cents on the dollar. Members are still going to get the inflation enhancements that I mentioned previously. So members, that's one less thing they have to worry about, is that their pension is going to be there regardless of what happens to WestJet.
So Derek, the pension will be there, but it'll stop growing. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. So since no new contributions are coming into the plan, no new future accruals will be made. So your benefits will still continue to grow with CPI if no new contributions are coming in.
So while we're on the subject of WestJet or a company potentially ceasing to exist, I would like to ask the question, what happens when the pilot ceases to exist? Because it's inevitable at some point, we're all going to pass. What are the survivor benefits offered by this pension plan?
So right off the top, I'll mention, given that we have half of our board is made up of members, the other half is made up of employers, The member side of the board has designed the plan to make sure it makes sense for all the pilots and all our 100,000 members. So our pension plan is designed to give you a pension for as long as you live, and if you have a spouse, give them a pension for as long as they live as well. So the survivor benefits, basically your spouse would get 60% of the pension that you were receiving if you die after you've started retiring. And there's also great survivor benefits if you die before you collect your first pension payment.
What if the pension member has a spouse and children? Is there a benefit that passes on to the children, and how would that happen?
Yeah, so we're probably getting into the weeds, and we'll provide a lot more information later on. But essentially, yes, if there are dependent children, and there's different definitions of that. So for example, age 21 or age 25 if they're going to post-secondary education, or actually as long as they live if they're financially dependent, for example, if it's a disabled child. But that is the plan, is that your pension after you die will continue on based on the plan rules, and it provides a benefit to all those different cohorts.
Okay. And what about in the event that there was a member that had no spouse or no children?
Yeah. So again, if they die before retirement, there's a concept called a commuted value, which is essentially the present value of your future pension. That goes to your named beneficiary. It could go to a charity. It could go to a brother, a sister, etc. Or if you haven't named a beneficiary, it will go to your estate and get distributed in accordance with your will. And I'll also mention that in our pension plan, we have something very unique in that if somebody is single when they retire and then they get married in retirement, that spouse will be eligible for the 60% pension as well.
Okay. So in a scenario where an individual has no spouse, no children, no dependents, they've retired and have started drawing from their pension, and then they pass, what mechanisms are in place there for transfer of financial assets?
Yeah, so essentially the bulk of the money goes back to the pool, but we do have a minimum pension guarantee. So every member is going to, or their estate in this case, is going to get at least the 60 payments that the member would have been entitled to. And I will also mention that our board is looking at extending that, and hopefully we'll have some news later in the year on that.
Okay, good to know. So Clayton, Dan, Derek, that has been quite a bit of information. I was wondering if you just might be able to touch on telling us how CAAT will be engaging with our pilot group in the coming months.
Well, this was like one of the many steps this summer in communicating with the pilots with what's going on, what's been going on. Stay tuned, pay attention to the fast reads, pay attention to future podcasts. We're planning an episode 2 with possibly more detailed explanations on some of the questions you've had for us on the line. There'll be some Q&As published as well. But more importantly, I think there's going to be some live, in-person joint sessions with CAAT at all of the bases that you can come and bring your questions forward to the pension provider. So that'll be the perfect opportunity for you to ask your questions.
Okay, well, guys, great podcast, great session, great information. It was an honor to have you guys all here. Thank you all so much for the time and effort that you have put in. And Derek, thank you so much for providing all of your expertise, and it is abundant to this podcast. I know that we'll be planning road shows for later in the summer, and there'll be much more upcoming information. Derek, I'd just like to hand it back to you and give you an opportunity to close out if there's anything specific that you would like to say to the group before we leave.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Well, first of all, thank you, Clayton, Daniel, and Desmond, allowing me time to spend with your members, your pilots, here at the CAAT offices in Toronto. Really looking forward to working to further communicate with the pilots, provide some education sessions to make sure they're informed about the pension plan. We have a saying at CAAT, the more that you know about the pension plan, the more you love the pension plan. So we're big believers in communication and in providing pilots with the information they can take so that they feel more comfortable about their retirement. And having a DB Plus pension plan in their workplace is a huge benefit.
I couldn't agree more. Once again, I would like to say a big thank you to you for taking the time out of your day to be a part of this podcast. With that in mind, I think we'll just wrap it up for today. Guys, thanks again for the efforts that you've put in. And I think that's about it for this episode of PIREP, the WestJet Pilots podcast. Remember, wear your lanyards, stay informed, read your communications, but most importantly, stay safe.